Hello and welcome to another episode of Metal Effort. Today I'm going to be reviewing this little guy, the small Sebenza 21 with the carbon fiber scale. This is an exclusive from knifeart.com. As I mentioned in one of my other videos, I got this knife in a knife raffle. So technically I paid 20 bucks for this. I'll try to keep that value out of my bias here for this knife. I'm trying to look at this objectively as if I paid full price for this, which is in the $400 to $500 range, depending on if you get it directly from Knife Art or if you pick it up on the second market. It'll run you more in the $330 to $350 for this guy if it's in good condition. This is not my reviewing structure is not an homage to Nick Shabazz. I'm kind of ripping him off a little bit, not because I want to steal from his creativity, but because it's pretty straightforward. I think it's well done, and he himself has said that he wants more people reviewing. So here I am, Nick. I'm reviewing. If you got knives that you want to review and don't have time to review, send them my way. I'm in San Diego too. I could come pick them up if you want. I am going to have my own opinions, and I'm not always going to agree with Nick. I want to be my own person. I want to do my own thing and just do my best. But a lot of the format is going to be very much the same. I acknowledge that. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if I come up with ways to improve it, I will, and we can be in this together. We're all part of the same knife community. It's about the knives, not just the person. So I'm going to do it a little bit different as far as what I'm calling it. I want to look at the dents in this metal. Dent is decent, excellent, negative, and terrible. The good, bad, and the ugly. But here on Metal Effort, we're calling it dent. We're going to look for dents in the metal. All right, so let's get into it. We want to do some size comparisons, which on this particular knife I think is very important. It is such a small knife. I really can't impart to you, if you haven't seen a small Sebenza, just how small it really is. You have the 940 next to it, and which is a pretty small knife in its own right, and it kind of dwarfs the size of the small Sebenza. It is tiny, very, very small. That is the most striking thing to the small Sebenza, is just the size. You know, comparing it to something like the PM2, it is a beast. The PM2 is gonna zoom out a little bit to pull that knife in. It is huge compared to the small Sebenza. I mean, even something as small as like a Lambic busker. And the busker, while not quite as long, is definitely a lot bigger, especially with this Largo blade. But, you know, technically I think this would probably fit in your pocket a lot better than this would, for all intents and purposes. The other thing to note about this particular model is that with that CF, when we do a little weight here, this sucker is light. I mean, 2.27 ounces. I mean, again, comparing it to a Lambic busker, it's lighter than the busker by quite a lot. That's impressive. I mean, sheesh. Just for fun, we'll compare it to that 940, which is pretty light, you know, especially with the G10 scales. That's giant PM2 3.8, which is not bad. That's about an ounce an inch, but this is way ahead of the curve. I mean, this is a 3-inch blade, and we are super duper light. So that's great. So let's get on with the decent in our dent. Very first thing is the size. That is a positive thing. I like this size. It's, if you're looking for an EDC knife and size in your pocket and weight is a big factor. This has got it where it counts. It's very, very lightweight. The knife is also like straight in your pocket, the way that it's shaped with the clip here. It just goes directly into your pocket. It's very easy for your hand to get in, you know, if you're going into your pocket either way. Like, there's nothing hanging off this thing. There's no pocket pecker. Maybe the thumb stub, but really it doesn't protrude from the knife hardly at all. So excellent shape for pocket. You don't really feel it. I was carrying it all day yesterday, and it was a pleasure to carry in my pocket, to be honest. The clip is another great part of the knife, decent part, I should say. It's, again, straight, which I like from an aesthetic purpose. I also like that it's riding perfectly on the lock bar. And even though the lock bar, you know, if I open the knife and the lock bar clicks in, there's enough pressure here on the clip to still maintain that pressure on that lock bar, which is great. That's good. Easy to get in. There's a huge ramp and good pressure. I could have put this in the grate, to be honest, but it's just the clip. So I'm keeping it in the decent. Next, the lanyard. Now, my particular knife didn't come with a lanyard, but when you buy them directly from Knife Art, I believe the lanyard is a part of it. It's a good lanyard from what I've heard, and I can see how, you know, where the lanyard tube is. It's in a good spot. It doesn't get in the way of the knife. You know, if you got the little pigtail hanging out of your pocket, it'd be very easy to grab that and just yank it out straight out of the pocket with that straight clip. It's well designed. I like the placement of where the lanyard tube is, and the lanyards themselves look classy. They look nice, the ones that come with the knife. So that's good. Next thing, the blade shape. I like the blade shape quite a lot, and it's also in the decent section because there are blade options. This is kind of your standard drop point blade type, but there's the Insingo blade shape, which I like as well, kind of a sheep's footy type with a little bit of a swedge at the front so you can get those piercing cuts. You know, depending on your preference, you know, you can get whatever you want, and it's nice that there's options for the blade shape. Next up is the HRC on the blade. So this has changed semi-recently, I think. Anything after like 2016-ish. They raised the HRC hardness, Rockwell hardness on the blade by 1. So instead of 58 to 59, it's 59 to 60, which is good. I think that was one of the common complaints about the steel used on the previous Sebenzas, that it was a little soft. Chris Reeve always said that he did that on purpose because it makes it easier to sharpen the blade. I think it's like the idea of, like, if you're in the field and you know, this is your only knife and you're going to use it for 20 years, that if you're like a mountain man, you could sharpen this on a stone if you find a good one, and if you needed to, it's soft enough to where that's not an issue. So the truth is, most of us have ways to sharpen it. You know, at minimum, sending it in for somebody else to sharpen it is not really a problem. But if you're willing to invest in your own sharpening equipment, you know, one HRC shouldn't make too much of a difference in the difficulty of sharpening this, but you get better edge retention for it. So I think it's a good direction for them to go, one more HRC hard. So that's good. The steel in general, S35VN, Chris Reeve had a hand in making this steel, and I think overall it's good to go. It's a good steel. Stainless, has good properties, tough enough, maintains its edge well enough, especially with that extra HRC. I don't really have a particular complaint about the steel itself. I think it's fine. It's good. Next thing is the jimping. The jimping on the blade is enough to where you can get that purchase on it without chewing up your finger. It's not very raised, and it's good. You know, there's no complaints about the jimping. I think it's in a good spot. The action. So this is like the famous Sebenza smooth, which I'm glad I've gotten a chance to experience. It's indeed smooth. There's no like, you know, jumping or stuttering when you're opening or closing. It's constant and consistent pressure. The washers in these things are oversized. You can kind of see it in here. There it is. Giant washers, and I think that helps to contribute to that, as well as the grease that you're using, basically, instead of like normal oils that, you know, maybe aren't quite the same thickness or elasticity. It's a good feeling. I like the smoothness of the pivot and the action. I think it's good. Last thing in the decent is the warranty. The warranty is excellent. If you have a hard time taking this thing apart and putting it back together, I think they say, you know, send the parts in a baggie and they'll be able to put it back together for you, which is awesome. Okay, next we're gonna get into the excellent in our pursuit of the dent here. And the excellent is something that Sebenzas are famous for, and that is the fit and finish. It's something, again, you can't really tell until you have one, and I'm gonna try to show it off as best I can with this video, but if I close the blade here, you can tell the distance. I mean, keeping in mind, this is already a very small knife, incredibly small, but you can see that very narrow gap between the blade and the scales. I mean, we're talking in incredibly narrow tolerances here, very small, still while maintaining that centering is awesome with all that pressure on this lock bar. To still keep it that centered is pretty impressive. You know, you can build a knife and have it pretty much centered, and then you put it into your knife, and that pressure from that lock bar tends to want to push the blade over. I've seen this with my PM2 and PM3s, where if I don't have this super duper tight on my pivot screws, that's what's gonna make that blade want to push over when the lock bar is pushing up against the blade. But I think, you know, the tolerances and those giant washers help to keep that blade centered, and which is super important because you're dealing with such very narrow gaps in between the blade and the scales. Very impressive. So the fit and finish is top notch. The CF finish is excellent. Super duper smooth. All the chamfering is done really well. Everything on this knife is basically perfect in terms of what they were trying to do with the knife. I don't have too many complaints. I have a couple in the fit and finish. I think only one, and I don't know if that's something that happens to all Sebenzas or just mine, but I'll get to that in a second. So fit and finish overall is excellent. Very impressed with that. Speaking of the SF here, the carbon fiber scale, and this is specific to this model, but the carbon fiber scale is awesome. You already seen the weight of this knife is top class. So this is the lightest small Sebenza that you can get, and a lot of that has to do with the carbon fiber. I really like it. I think it adds to the classiness of the knife overall. It looks great, it feels great, it serves a purpose, and when you can have something like this where you have art and functionality collide to just make a strictly better knife, in my opinion, I think that's great. So CF, thumbs up from me. Dependability is the next thing I want to talk about. You know, Chris Reeve really tries to drive this home, but if you take good care of this knife, you can use it for 20 years. Obviously, I've had this for like a week. I haven't had it for 20 years, so it's not something that I can really test myself. But I can definitely see, given the materials that are used, the way that it's put together, that you can definitely get many years of use, dependable use out of this knife. There's no finicky deployment system. There's very simple design, very robust design, and there's no reason you can't get a lot of years out of this knife. And the last thing in the excellent category, and this is 100% subjective, but it looks good. It's a very simplistic design, I think, with the carbon fiber scale, the blue anno touches here. This is a very clean, elegant design. It's very minimalistic, and I think that, however much we want to deny it, at least for me, I think how a knife looks and feels in your hands contributes to whether you want to keep this knife. Do you want to carry this when you are trying to pick a knife out to carry for the day? I think what it looks like, in the lunchroom or showing your friends, plays a part. And I think this looks excellent for what it does. It's very functional, but it's also very classy. Now we're gonna move on to the negative in our dent. The negative, I've got a few things here. This kind of subjective on this first one, but it bugs me. It's this Idaho made. I don't mind that they put Idaho made on there. That's fine. I was born in Idaho. I don't have anything against Idaho in particular, but it's so big. Number one, it's got like this Comic Sans font, and you got this like expensive titanium classy look, and Idaho made. It doesn't go with the rest of the knife. The other thing is it's upside down. Like I'm right-handed, so I'm looking at the knife presentation side. I'm opening it like this. You have the Chris Reeves symbol here, and then I turn it around. Where is the sucker made? Amadi. Oh, Hadi. No, it's upside down. That is upside down. I don't care how you look at this knife. That is upside down. I hold it left-handed, upside down. I hold it right-handed, upside down. Doesn't make sense. I mean, if you're gonna have that, put it straight. Just a little nitpick there, but all right. Next one. This is a little bit more substantial. No finger choil here. So your thumb wants to go in the jimping. That makes sense. But with my PM2s and my PM3s, I want to put my finger here, and it doesn't fit. It does not fit, and this little pokey part right here, like on the Alamic Busker, they make this just flat. That's great. It doesn't have to be like a giant choil like on the PM2. It doesn't have to be this humongous choil where it's curved in like that. I mean, it's fine, it's comfortable, I like it, but it doesn't have to be like that. It can be something as simple as just making this part flat, and then I have a spot to put my finger there and choke up. And that jimping is not way back here, it's up here on the Sebenza, and so it just naturally, you want to pinch with these two fingers together, and it's just pointed and it's uncomfortable, so I gotta like put it back here. It's fine, I guess, but man, it's awkward. Another thing, and again, this is subjective, but when the knife is closed and you're looking at it this way, you got this hump right here. Now, obviously, that hump makes connection to the stop pin, but you could still flatten it out or extend the part of the knife, flatten that out, have the knife scale go this way to kind of cover that hump. Bring this pointy part down, make it flat, and it would actually fit that knife. I mean, you're already looking at this arch right here. It is not symmetrical. It's asymmetrical. It kind of falls down more on this side than on this side. Like, why not have that even and then come to like a flat point right here? And then when you open the knife and you use the knife, it'd be more flat so you can put your finger there and not have it like poking into something. It doesn't make sense to me. So that's could have been in the terrible section, but I'll leave it in the negative section for now. That leads me into my next point here, and that's that the knife, ergonomically speaking, is not great. It's not terrible. It's not like super duper hot spotty, except for this choil. lack of choil, pokey, anti-choil. The rest of the knife, it fits. I can get 4 fingers on it barely. It's kind of like 3.5 finger grip. I have medium-sized hands, and so I don't know many people where they can get like a comfortable. It kind of like, yeah, man, it's just screaming for that choil. The clip is fine. It doesn't, even though this is lifted up, it feels okay in my hand. It's all right, but it's just so small, and you don't have a place to put all your fingers. And so it, even as a 3, if I do 3 finger, then it's like I want to put my thumb here, and it's just, I don't know. It's awkward. It's very awkward. The other thing, this is something that I'm sure, or I hope rather, that this is exclusive to my knife, but that lanyard tube, if you take the lanyard out, which obviously this doesn't have one, it rattles. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's like supposed to be all tight tolerances, but rattly. I don't mean. And I don't like that. I don't know. I'm gonna try to get in there and see if I can rotate it or do something to make it not rattle. I might even just take it out, but then that kind of leaves another gaping hole right there. I don't know. Not my favorite thing. That leads me onto this machine hole, which I'm sure they're there to help with all these tight tolerances, to line everything up when they're making the knife so it all lines up correctly, but can't you use one of the other holes that you're already making? Like, not every knife has a machining hole like this. I'm sure that there's a way to figure out how to put this knife together without that. It looks like I have a missing screw or something. It doesn't match anything. It's just, and even on the other side, they make it a part of the, start of the lock bar. So it's not even all that symmetrical, like between the two sides. Why is that there? Can we make this knife without it? I especially on the carbon fiber, it's just like slab of beautiful carbon. Hole right there. I don't know. I don't like that. This hasn't happened on mine yet. I'm trying to keep really good care of it, but inevitably it'll happen, and I see enough on other Sebenzas. But on this side, you're gonna have a lot of snail trails. The finish, the blasting that they put on the titanium, it's fine actually. It feels better than I thought it was gonna feel. I thought it would feel a little bit more sandpapery. Feels okay, but the snail trails are gonna still show up on this finish. On the positive side, you've got this, which will not have those snail trails near as easily or as noticeable. So it only applies to half the knife. That's good. Last thing in the negative section is the deployment. Now, I've already said that I like the movement, I like the smoothness of it, but yeah, this sucker is slow to open. You can do it one-handed, but it's not winning any races in the quick and easy department. I'm finding myself, if I'm going to open this knife, I'm going to do a two-handed open. So it's kind of like a slip joint, almost, in practicality of like speed of deployment. This and a slip joint are basically the same, which I'm not super excited about. I think the idea of Sebenza, which means worker in Zulu, is that, this is a practical knife. Okay. Being able to get my knife out quickly is practical. I don't really think you can argue that. I mean, you can get the knife out quicker, I'm sure, some way, without it being like a finger guillotine on the way down. I don't know. It's not fun to use, and it's not practical. This like slow, methodical, yeah, now it's open. The other thing is, to close this one-handed, it is no easy task. Like, the pressure on that lock bar to do with my thumb is too much. Like, my thumb is already getting chewed up over here. Yeah. So a lot of negative things here, but I've got more. We're gonna go into the terrible. And this is kind of subjective, a little bit, I guess, but I still think it's a valid point, and it's in the terrible. Use new steel. You've got Spyderco who's using new steels up the wazoo, and I think that's really important for a few reasons. One, from sales. Like, I know Chris Reeve is selling these suckers, but I think it would take it to the next level is if he had different steels. And I understand why he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to introduce, another factor of, oh man, I got to treat all these knife blades differently depending on the steel. It's going to mess up their sharpening system and their grinds. He had a hand in developing the 35EN, S35EN. So it's like, I could see him like, oh, I'm betraying the steel that I helped create by using other steels. I get it. I understand. Nobody would think any less of you, Chris, if you used different steels. Like, you can always have your S35EN that you want to use. You always have that as an option. But if you want to charge more for a knife, even, I'd be willing to give you more money if you had more interesting steels. Like, there's a lot of innovation in the market. You've got LC200N, which is awesome for the corrosion resistance. You've got, Maximent for like awesome edge retention. Like, experiment a little bit. You've got Crewwear if you want something really tough and something that's going to be great, out in the field. Like, there's other options. Experiment. Don't be afraid. Innovate. Try new things. Which leads me into my next terrible thing. Use different deployment options. You had the tie lock. The tie lock was awesome. It wasn't as practical, obviously, as this. It was very low on like the lock security system for the really high-end things. But for the vast majority of people that have a folding knife, you don't need something this robust. And so give us other options. Do a flipper. Do a front flipper. I think that the front flipper on this might not be bad if you had, not these giant washers, but you had a ceramic system and you could still, maintain the general shape and look of your knife. I think that would be okay. But do something new. You've shown that you can do it with the tie lock. Do it with the Sebenza line, man. There's got to be something that you can do to get this sucker deployed out a little bit quicker. Which leads me to the next terrible thing is this thumb stud. Now, I heard about this before I had the Sebenza that it's kind of pointy. It didn't look too sharp to me in pictures, and so I kind of thought, it doesn't look that bad. I'm sure it's fine. But considering the pressure it takes to actually open up the knife, you have to put a lot of pressure. You can see my thumb there. It has to dig in pretty hard to get enough pressure to break that detent and overcome that very stiff pressure. I don't like it. Enough to where I put it in the terrible. That I'm already a little disgruntled that I have to so slowly deploy the knife and I have to give constant pressure, and that constant pressure is this little thing jabbing into you. It's like, hey buddy, not only do you have to like really gouge into me to break that detent, but now you have to like push the whole way. It's like a kick in the balls. I really don't like this. I don't know if a different thumb stud would make it better. Like if I go look for a third-party thumb stud and screw it in, I have no idea. But this knife is so small that the amount of space you have to get between the little cutout here and that choil, or I guess it's a choil right here, but that little chamfering to get in there, it's a lot of pressure. And so I don't know, even if I changed the shape, it would have to be like a cone almost, and I could put my thumb in the cone so it wasn't so much weight and then push it out that way. Maybe that would work, but It sucks. It's terrible. It makes me not want to use the knife or open the knife. Like I said, I'm defaulting to this opening because it doesn't hurt so bad. So it's a slip joint, man. It really sucks. I hate that. Yeah. So last terrible point here is the price. The price on this is pretty high for what you're getting. It's a titanium lock. You know, good steel, CF. This is a $200 knife, I think. It's probably what would be fair for this knife. You know, $400 or $500 for this knife. It's too much. It is too much for this knife. $400. I think you could do a lot better. I think it has its place. I don't want to just unequivocally say don't buy this knife. It is very small, and you're getting a lot of knife given the weight of the knife. And, you know, this Sebenza kind of style thing has to be your thing. If you're like a Sebenza kid, this is probably the pinnacle of a small Sebenza in terms of weight and practicality. But if you can get over the BBB, the brand booty blinding, I think you can do a lot better with other brands. Maybe something that doesn't quite have the cachet of Sebenza and Chris Reeve. You're paying a lot for this Comic Sans, which is comical to say the least. Idaho made. You're paying a lot for these little symbols, and I don't think I can recommend it. Like if you got a buddy that like, hey man, you're the knife guy. I think I want to get a knife. You know, not like a collector, but just somebody that wants a working knife. You would, at first, you're like, oh yeah, you know, a good one knife solution that's reliable, is going to last a long time, just get the job done. Sebenza, right? But this sucks. It's so painful to open this knife, and there's so many other better options out there, and they're not innovating, that if there was no other knife brand, this is objectively, it's a good knife. It really is. But given the value that's out there in other options, I think you can do better. So I don't know what I'm going to call my gem or not gem. I'll figure that out. If you've got ideas, shoot that into the comments. But whatever my version of a gem is, this is not it. This is not it. I don't know if I'm going to keep this knife or not. You know, it's $20 for me personally. Yeah, it's great value. You know, if I think $200 is a good value for this, a tenth of that, obviously. So I might keep it just to always have a Sebenza to compare things to, or I might sell it. Use that money to get other things that are innovating, like the Elijah Isham Pleroma when it comes out. That knife is awesome. It's useful, and it's got a whole mountain of innovation ahead of this knife. So that's my review of the small Sebenza from Knife Art with the carbon fiber scale. Hope you guys have a wonderful day.